Today, we two foolish men are joined by world-renowned professional elephant rider and experienced sand dune sledder, Kyle Mills. Welcome back to No Limits.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me again.
I don't know, what is this? Is this the fourth or fifth time we've had you on the pod?
I'm not sure. Is it that many?
Yeah, I think so. It's at least four. It might be five, but yeah, you I don't know. You like to waste your time with us, and we greatly appreciate it.
That's fun to do a deep dive every now and then.
Well, before we get going, we must warn the audience, just like last year for Enemy at the Gates. Today we are spoiling Oath of Loyalty. We are going to ask you, Kyle, to take us through the thought process behind this book. So if you haven't read it, what the heck are you doing? Get out there, buy your copy of Oath of Loyalty, get the audiobook while you're at it, because George Goodell is off the charts amazing with this one. And spoiler warning, big spoiler warning, we're going to be right off the bat talking about this book and maybe even starting with the ending. So let me just ask, the Cooks, where are we headed? I know you can't tell us too much, but in a post-Anthony Cook, post-resignation world, do they fade into the background? Is there a rift in their marriage? I'm really hoping we still get to see Catherine. She's just so damn smart and savvy politically. Oh, can you give us any hints of where we're headed? Because this book ended with a bombshell.
Yeah, I kind of want to close out that arc. I think we talked about it with Enemy at the Gates, that this was originally supposed to be a 3-book arc kind of about the fall of American democracy. And then, all the talk of stolen elections and January 6th that felt like it was just a little too current. So I was, I had to rewrite Enemy at the Gates to some extent, and then figure out a way to back myself out of what I had kind of very much set up as, this arc. So my goal is to kind of have them fade into the background and start a new chapter, no pun intended, with Mitch.
Okay, I'm glad to hear there's still some wrap up to be had. I mean, we, as you're going to hear in our second half review, because so far we've only recorded and published our review of the first half of the book, we did some irresponsible speculation. And so we went down the rabbit hole, of what could be done with the Cooks after this resignation. And
Sure.
We might have gotten a little far-fetched. So we're glad you're here tonight to maybe ground us and keep us on track.
Well, I mean, it would be fun. They're great characters. But again, anything you did with them kind of led down that path. And I don't know, I just start to think it becomes maybe a little depressing to read about. It's also maybe, I always want to be a little controversial because I want to be interesting and I want to show people what's maybe right around the corner. And I've been pretty successful, strangely, at that lately, but too successful in this case. And it's very polarizing. So, I don't want to add to that. There's enough of that in the United States.
Yeah. And we've applauded you for confronting that polarization and, your line about, is it Trump? Is it Hillary? It's neither. It's both. You should be vague. It's entertainment. And we're really proud and blown away by how you've handled that. And you continue to do that, I think, with the Cooks. They're so extreme, yet they very clearly represent veins or strains in American society that we could be headed towards. And you've predicted the future in the past. I really hope you're not predicting the future with them. Some would say we've already had the Cooks. Are they still to come? How do you feel? Are you feeling any better about the fractured American society and the fabric of America? Are you starting to see some progress, or are you still feeling the tears are there?
No, I wouldn't say I'm seeing a lot of progress. I think we're headed in the wrong direction, but I think if history shows anything, and if you listen to our founding fathers, actually, they wrote on this, that democracy is temporary, and our democracy is temporary. It's not the way humans are wired. I'm convinced of this, and it explodes. and it's great for a while, and then people get tired of it and it goes away. And it's funny because it works amazingly well. I mean, I don't understand it, but I think it's pretty clear that's where we're headed, and that's really depressing. So I don't want to write about it.
Well, let's go from that depression to something really hopeful. And we lost Chris here, by the way. He's trying to get back in, so I'll carry us forward with some things on my mind. And Chris, I don't think was willing to take this plunge with me, but I'm going to do it.
While he's off.
Yeah, I think he might come around to this. He's just not there yet. But Kyle, this is your best book yet. This is the best Kyle Mills book in the Mitch Rapp series so far. And I'm not a prisoner of the moment. I have not said that really about many books, that it's my favorite in the series just because it's new. But this time, I really mean it from the heart. I can say your best dialogue writing, the best character development, the best story arcs of moving characters forward, which I wasn't sure if they could move forward anymore, such as Irene. You bring them to another level in this book, and you do that without a lot of action writing. Can you tell us about your approach to this book, of how you wanted to balance what I see as limited action, but really heavy on character development and motivations and decisions?
Yeah, it's in a way, this book, I mean, it has a fair amount of action in it. I mean, it starts with it. You have the house attack, which is, I mean, if you look at it chapter by chapter, maybe not, but that thing's like a tenth of the book, just that one action sequence.
True.
So it's, but then it becomes kind of a cat and mouse, which is not something historically you've seen a lot in the Mitch Rapp thrillers. So I thought it'd be interesting to do, and I like to, as I've said before, stretch a little bit with the series to give Mitch different challenges that he hasn't seen before, see how he'll react to them, but also use a little bit different structures and show the reader something new. So I don't know that that's always something that, to be honest with you, that readers want necessarily. I think they love Vince's books. They love the series. They love the structure of it. And, I understand that. I was a fan of the series too. But after 22, or no, I'm writing 22. This would be after 21. I think it's necessary to, vary it a little bit. And that's what I tried to do here.
I wanted to ask you about the first, sort of, I guess, third of this book, in terms of really trying to deal with the consequences of your last book, Enemy at the Gates. And I think, we've even seen within this series, we're left with a cliffhanger, and that's very quickly dealt with within, let's say, the prologue or the first couple chapters. But I feel like you did try to do something different here, where you really wanted to drive home, follow up what you did in Enemy and address it. And because obviously that's going to be such an impactful event in Mitch's life. I don't know. Can you just talk me through your thought process of, why what led you down the road of wanting to deal with Mike Nash's death for such a long period of time?
Yeah, well, this book is pretty heavily arced from the last book. I mean, much more so than any book I've ever done, and at least as much as Vince ever did. So Vince definitely arced the books or stories over too. I never did when I wrote under my own name. And then I might have one-upped Vince a little bit in that this is definitely one story kind of split in two at a convenient, spot. So I really felt like you needed to understand exactly where he was coming from and the level of impact that something like what happened to Mike had, and how the readers would interpret that. And it's because it's a complicated situation. I felt like repeating it would be better than trying to color it, to tell it from Irene's point of view or Mitch's point of view, which really would color it if it was just backstory.
Right.
Because what I've definitely found, and what benefited me maybe from writing the beginning of this, is that people really all saw Mike differently, and which is great because people see real people differently. So if you've written kind of a rich character, nobody's going to be able to agree on them. And I honestly, by and large, people did not see Mike as sympathetically as I thought I wrote him. I felt like he was a guy who had really gotten backed into a corner. It's a little like what Irene talks about, working with the CIA as opposed to working with somebody like the FBI. Your choices when they get to her level are bad and worse. They're never good. I'll fix it. That never happens. So, I wanted to drive that home, and to show where kind of the United States is right now in the Rappverse, which obviously parallels what's going on in the real world.
Yeah, Mike. I'll just to touch on what something Mike said. You mentioned that. I also agree. I think this is one of your, if not the best written one of your best written stories. And I liked all the callbacks. Was that conscious to you that those were popping up more? I know like you guys, most in this genre do it, but this book just felt like there was a lot more callback. We got Grisha, we got the introduction of, your misfit characters in BB and Sadie. And, we even got a transfer of power callback when Mitch goes to the White House, right? Where he says, something like, he saved the president in a bunker not too far from the one that he was being placed in. Was that conscious in your mind?
Yeah, I think so, because it's such an incredible series, that Vince started and wrote so many books that, there's a lot of complexity to this universe that you wouldn't want to get, do too deep a dive. But I think, these are the things that made Mitch what he is, and he would think about. Like, naturally, this isn't really something I do consciously. It's just, it seems obvious to me as Mitch walks into the White House, you get this really new situation with a president, that he would think back to his first, interaction with a president and what, kind of informed his career, which was presidents liked him and trusted him. So, or even in that case, owed him. So, and the contrast of that. So, yeah, and as far as like BB and Sadie, that just seemed like a really interesting, like an interesting thing to play him against. But also, I'm in Mitch's situation, right? I have created Legion, and I created them without knowing how Mitch was going to, get out of it. But I created this killer that's really, really good, and is sort of, he's a little bit Mitch Rapp kryptonite, right? Not a person that's going to face you with a gun. Yeah, you're never going to see them coming. So, I created them and said, these are their capabilities. And then I had to sit there and figure out, how's Mitch going to win? And it was hard. What would I do in this situation? How am I going to defeat, somebody that's just completely going to sneak up behind you and, do some really underhanded thing that you're never going to know.
I'm really glad you spoke to that, because the Kyleisms here are so strong. I don't know if you recall, but we had Flynnian moves, Flynnianisms, and we've also had Kyleisms. And we know you like to write the quirky characters, the little idiosyncrasies, and who better for that than Sadie and BB? And it just comes on so strong and thick. But the thing is, it's Rapp and Irene doing that and setting that stage on purpose for the operational theater they're in. Legion is going to work outside the bounds. You can't just have Maslick, Bruno, Scott, hold up in a house ready to shoot him out.
Right. Yeah. They're never going to present a target.
Right.
To shoot at. Yeah.
So you'd rather have someone crazy.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, it's funny. I just figured out day before yesterday, where I came up with that with that idea, with Sadie sort of descending into madness and kind of becoming Claudia, because I was out working in my garage and I saw it written across the outfeed table on my table saw, and I had written it in pencil across the table. So clearly that's when it came to me, but that was not planned. Like, I knew Sadie was nuts, you know. I mean, she's kind of a psycho. She's a bit of a not a bit of a psychopath. She is a psychopath. So working with her was always going to be hard. But I've known people who have done really big undercover jobs before who have struggled to, after, I mean, we're talking about years potentially, have struggled to come out of that character. And so somebody like her, you could see her descending into that really, really quickly. And it was an interesting challenge. I love a good character challenge to make that descent kind of realistic. And, you know, so every time you saw her, which wasn't that often, you know, she descended just a little bit more into that pit, you know, and of course everybody's thinking, can we just get this done before it really hits the fan?
And BB says, I told you so.
Yeah, exactly. You know, because it's kind of like you've got multiple ticking clocks now. You're like, when's Sadie just going to blow up? And then the whole op is just screwed.
You didn't write it, but another one of those ticking clocks was Claudia's got to be thinking, did you sleep with her? And that tension there was, so you're bringing in these characters. They're informing the operational theater that Mitch has to adjust to. They're also informing the relationships between the family and the characters we love. And the family dynamic is a huge portion of this book. And it just works so seamlessly and it blends together and you get yourself out of that jam, you know, and that's what we need authors to do for us because we don't have the imagination for it. Thank God you do.
Yeah, you know, you have to think about, all these things that came together. And, you know, Mitch, under Vince's, tutelage, he was lucky. You know, he always worked with really good operators. Right. It was normally Scott and his guys, and he rarely had to deal with anybody he didn't want to deal with. And I've had a couple of books where he's just gotten thrown together with people he just really doesn't want to deal with because he just wants to work with Scott and the guys, right? But that doesn't always work. You know, what is it? I can't remember who said it. It was maybe the Bush under administration. You know, you go to war with the army you've got, and not the Rumsfeld, and not the army you wish you had. And that's Sadie and BB are the army he's got.
Yeah, that's a little more grounded in reality in terms of, like, I just feel like how an operative like Mitch would have to work. You know, obviously in best case scenario, he would want to use the best of the best, whether that's Scott or whoever. But, you know, you can't often do that. I like that, you know, we met Sadie very quickly, right, in Total Power. Mm-hmm. And, you know, she had, you know, quick introduction, was used lightly. But I thought that, like, meeting her here and getting her a little bit more fleshed out sort of made her appearance in Total, like, I thought back to her appearance in Total Power, and it made that appearance made more sense, and it, like, it actually filled that out a little bit better. I liked it. You could argue the same thing with BB, you know, in the same way. I liked how you fleshed out those characters a little bit more. And, you know,
it's the world's worst character development, right? I'm going to develop this character 2 books from now. Don't worry. Stay with me.
It's all good. It's all good.
And, you know, I was thinking, and I think I mentioned this, Chris, when we recorded about the book, BB might have been your first character that you wrote yourself in the series, right? That opening chapter of The Survivor.
Yeah, I think so.
BB's the early days.
And really an unusual character. I sort of purposely introduced a character that was very unusual for the series.
Yeah.
So, just to throw in something a little bit different. So I thought, and she, she's super useful. I mean, she's come back a few times, saved Mitch's life once. I mean, she's actually a great operative. So, like, really reliable and extremely good at unique in her abilities. Unfortunately, her abilities are driving her slowly insane. But I mean,
that's
genius is genius, right? You know, it happens to geniuses. So I like her, and I like that she now works for Scott. So I think Mitch, you can see his arc now. He's becoming more mature, and it's funny. A lot of people on tour have said, we feel like he's getting older now again, but I'm not really aging him physically. But it's a whole different world. The world's changed so much since Vince wrote these books, and you have the character that he created, which is a very realistic character for the time. But it's also very realistic that a guy like a guy who spent his life in Afghanistan and the Middle East fighting terrorists, would now be having to start thinking about what's my role in the world. I mean, we all do, right? I'm older than you guys quite a bit, but even I think at my age, what's my role in the world? Do I really understand what's going on? Do I really understand where America's going? Really, is it any of my business anymore? Or is it maybe the younger people? So I think it's natural that he's thinking about those things, and I think it deepens his character and creates that character evolution that's super important in series, but also extremely hard when you're on book 21.
Right. Now, there's one move you make that I don't know if you intended it to have this impact, but it hit me really hard emotionally. And actually, I don't know if I've felt this way since the Consent to Kill epilogue, which, just to preface, is my favorite of Vince's writing, where Rapp confronts the Goulds, confronts Louis and Claudia. It's like this earth-shattering moment of revelation about who he is and what he was about to do. And that happened here. I felt that way when Claudia is talking to Mitch, and one of those just shut up moments, like, don't mansplain anything to me, just listen. And she gets through to him, and she literally says, "You've become such a good father." It hit me so hard. And there's a whole soliloquy, a page or two. I actually, in our part 2 episode of the book, I read the whole page. It was so meaningful to me. I had to read out the whole page. Rapp is a good father, and Claudia validates it. And I think he needs to hear that. Is that part of the aging process that he's coming into this role?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can see how, still, he's not the perfect father for sure. But, if you look at his relationship early with Anna, he was just terrified of her. He just couldn't pass her off fast enough, right? And now they've got a relationship. Like, he can talk to her. It's hard for somebody like him. I've known so many people like him over the years to relate to a kid like that. Particularly, he's gone a lot. And it also goes two ways. And somebody brought this up recently, that it's really interesting when you take a person like Mitch, who's everybody has a strong opinion about, and give him somebody who doesn't give a shit who he is, right? Anna doesn't know any of this stuff. She's just, he's Mitch to her, right? Yep. The guy that, hasn't fixed her, gotten her the bike, he said he would, and is always busting on her animals, trying to eat them. and so I like that view of him, that you strip away all the things he's done, good and bad, and see him as like a normal dude. I was using the example of somebody, if you've ever met anybody who's super famous and seen the people, or super powerful potentially, and seen the people around them and how they behave, and then meet their husband or wife and kids and see that to them, it's just like whatever, dad, right? So I think that's a relationship that also kind of shows where he's headed, or where he's trying to head in his life.
I also sense some jealousy towards Scott with how easy their relationship, Anna and Scott's relationship, seems to be. Yes. Like, Scott just comes in as this uncle, this happy-go-lucky uncle who could just do whatever, and Rapp's over here like, I don't even know what to say at times. Yeah.
Scott's just such a cool guy. Yes. He's like so much cooler than Rapp, right? I mean, he's the blonde, like everybody likes him. He's really funny, and he and Anna are always like driving the tractor around and stuff. He's just a natural at that kind of stuff. But the other fundamentally though, like what you said is exactly right. The uncle figure, right? The uncle figure doesn't have any responsibility here,
Right.
but Mitch starting to feel the weight of fatherhood. Like this is his fault. If she's screwed up, she gets hurt, all this stuff. They talk about that. That's talked about a lot at the end of Enemy at the Gates, where, can you just take her and hide out for her entire childhood? No, she deserves better than that. You have to figure out how to fix that. Scott doesn't have to fix it.
True.
There's also an important, I guess you'd say, balancing of power in the relationship with Mitch and Claudia. I believe it's earlier on. Oh, actually, it's when she identifies the tattoo of the people who hit the house in South Africa. And I feel like that moment hit Mitch pretty hard because she's been trying to tell him, you're not the one putting the family in danger. You don't have to bear that burden solely on your shoulders. I have skeletons in my closet too. And that was the moment where they almost were put on equal footing for being responsible for the family, because Claudia could say, they're after me, Mitch. Like, this time it wasn't caused by you. And he actually
Right.
chuckles at that, or like he feels the burden lifted. So I just really like how these dynamics in the family are shaping up.
Yeah, and I see them that way.
Yeah.
As equals in
Right.
many ways.
Right.
They where his wife Anna was so different
Yes.
than him, and their relationship was so, I don't know, a little uneven in a way. Like she rode him a lot, but it was a little ineffective. It's like, so whereas, Claudia and I think now he sees this. In my mind, this was kind of an epiphany moment for him. And I think I'd said specifically in the book, no matter what happens, we're better off together than we are apart. Because in this case it's her, but the next time it'll be him. And but they have these threats, and together they're better than the sum of their parts. So that I think is something they've gotten through, because they've had this conversation many times before.
Right. Yes.
I mean, which he alludes to, and this is the last time. They're just gonna, this is just who they are. This is the messy relationship. Everybody brings their messy past to their relationships. It's just theirs are much messier than ours are.
The sum of the parts being greater is then not just told to the reader, but demonstrated in the hit at the house. The way she's on the comms is she's protecting Anna. She's like the super mom. She's protecting Anna. She's on the comms. She's doing what we knew she did best from the old Louis Gould days, but she's doing it to protect and defend the family. Mitch is the shooter for sure, but he would have gotten nowhere without the dogs and without Claudia. And so the way you pull the family together is just incredible here.
Yeah, it would be unrealistic that Mitch would have survived that. Maybe he could have escaped it, but like that he could have done what he did without her calling out all those moves. So they were, to me, that was it wasn't 50-50. Like you said, it was more like, 40-40-20. You got to give 20 to the dogs. But that was a two-person operation, and the people were equally important. So that it very much, exactly what you're saying, a demonstration of, they can't do this on their own, individually.
I'm curious, one more thing here. Sorry, Chris, but at least to me, and I'm curious if you were cognizant of this, that hit at the house was very reminiscent of Consent to Kill, and the hit on the house where I think Rapp takes out 13 guys on his own. Now it's 10, 2 for the dogs. Without Claudia, he wouldn't have been able to do that. So he's aging. It's not the onslaught that 13 guys with RPGs had back in the Consent to Kill days.
Right.
But I just sense these callbacks.
That one, I have to admit, as much as I'd like to say that was intentional, it really wasn't. it's just how I saw the story logically unfolding.
Right.
Well, speaking of getting older, and I want to sort of talk about Legion a little bit more, in the sense that they're this young, up and coming, new threat. There's a little bit of a running dialogue that me and Mike have about the events of separation of power when Mitch was outed and his face was on the, put out there. How have you chosen to one, deal with that, and two, I struggle to think that like Legion would really have no idea who he was, or Mitch is just that well at disguising himself, or I don't know if you could just speak a little bit on that.
Yeah. So that was a tough one. There were a number of things that Vince left that were not super consistent in the universe. Yeah. And that was probably the worst of them, because he then went back to Mitch being pretty anonymous.
Right.
Yes.
So, yeah. What I did was I decided to take the middle road, which is what I normally did in the series, and that was to say, okay, I'm going to have Mitch unknown to the public, but pretty well known to his kind of the people that were be operators.
Yep.
And I saw Legion as not. I mean, she did in the end suspect who he was.
Right.
When she saw what he did. But that was a tough one. I honestly am not sure why Vince did that. Vince was a bit of a pantser, and I think he did that and maybe didn't fully think through the ramifications of having him outed like that. Or, and maybe even more likely, he did not see Mitch Rapp as the icon that he'd created. I mean, we saw that throughout the series a little bit with Mike Nash. That maybe Vince never initially planned to write this epic saga about one guy, and that he was going to write a few books about him. The first book didn't have Mitch Rapp in it.
Right.
He's going to write a few books about it. He's going to move on to Mike Nash or Coleman or whatever. Mitch was going to get shot or fade into the background, and So it's easy to look back now and say, oh, it was obvious that this whole thing was going to turn into this 21 now book saga. But I don't necessarily know that that's what Vince had in mind. And it may not have happened in the end.
It almost became part of the lore. Like this is a series that definitely has its own lore. And I can't say that about many thriller genres or thriller books. They're just kind of beach reads, but this one has its own lore. And to us, the separation of power problem is just an integral part of what makes the Rapp series. Like we had to write that one off ages ago, with Vince, and just expect it. Some people will know who Rapp is, some won't, is what it is. And I kind of like that flair.
It's a bit of a convenience. Yeah, it becomes a bit of a convenience, to be honest with you, that you're like, well, if it works that they know who he is, or if it works that they don't.
Although that kind of connects to this kind of connects to a pretty small scene that you left dangling, and I was curious about it because I really enjoyed it. It's when that cop shows up in Franchuk, and the cop has this really weird suspicion that this Burhan character isn't who he says he is, and there was foul play involved. He thinks it's drugs, but it kind of reinforces this idea that Rapp has this aura. No one quite knows what it is that he carries about him, and this air, but everyone who meets him who's in the field in some way has a sense. And I thought that character kind of resonated with me, because that's how a lot of us are. If we were to encounter someone who actually does these operations, just kind of give them like a side eye, have no idea, probably not even recognize them. Oh, you're a retired Marine living, in McLean, Virginia, not too far from Langley, who's 70 years old. And, it's like, was there something to your career in the past? What do you think about that cop scene? What were you going for there? Because he just kind of fades away, even though he very clearly had suspicions.
I didn't want to turn that into kind of a subplot. However, I have many pet peeves in thriller novels and movies. And one of them is that everybody gets to do this, and there are never any repercussions. So that is kind of where I was going with it. It's like you see this all the time in movies where somebody will, they'll have a giant shootout and car chase that goes through all of San Francisco, but the police never, intervene,
Right.
and there's never an investigation. It's never on the news. It just sort of happens and then it's gone. Similarly, like Scott Coleman, when he took his beating from Grisha, he sat out a book because, that's another one of my pet peeves is when, people are shot 6 times and thrown off a building and set on fire. And then the next scene, not only are they fine, their hair is perfect.
Oh, the gray man.
Yeah. So yeah, with the movies, the movies love that. Right.
Yeah.
And everybody's got to be super good looking, all the time. And for instance, I got into a kind of an argument with my editor, Vitz's editor, about, damage to Mitch's face. It really bothered her. Remember when he got the crap beat out of him by Maslick?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that much damage, he's having all this dental work done. I mean, it's going to show. And she was really against me kind of changing the way he looked a little bit. So in the end, I didn't do it. But
only the scar, nothing but the scar.
Yeah, just like a scar. And but that's another, one of those things that with the universe, and particularly for me, it can't have hiccups in it. Like for me to continue it forward, I have to understand it. So it has to feel really real to me. And those are the things that I thought there's no way I can just let this go as, he killed 10 guys at his house and he's just going to go back and paint and, turn the furniture back over and nobody's ever going to talk to him about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it would make sense that, like, one, the cops would show up, and two, they would be suspicious, that he is not who he says he is. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So I have to ask the elephant in the room. We saw a couple characters come back. We saw Grisha come back for a hot second. Sadie and BB we already talked about. Where's our man Marcus? Well, he was not in this book. He's one of the No Limits favorites. What's he doing at this time?
He could have been purged.
Yeah.
Was he purged by the cooks?
No. I still see him there. It just wasn't that kind of an operation.
Okay. All right.
So
all right. Good to know.
No, I still see him definitely as part of the universe. But Marcus pops up. Be realistic. That when he's needed. But not an operations guy, not a logistics guy, just a tech guy.
In my mind, he's already working for Nicholas Ward for some reason.
That's our irresponsible speculation, right?
Yeah, he was offered
Ward's
the job.
Getting a
right?
network going on, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And Irene's got some decisions to make, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's in a bit of a quandary right now because, and I think she mentions this, that she was so focused on external threats that she did not see the divisions in America becoming the main threat to the country. And I think it's realistic for her a person like Irene Kennedy, to be really concerned about that. I mean, she's paid not to have blind spots, right?
Right.
And this one came, and it's really manifested in the Rapp verse, which is parallel to ours, and she's got to figure out what to do about it. And that's a much harder question than what do you do about, a terrorist coming, trying to smuggle a weapon in and kill, a few thousand of us, compared to, the potential downfall of the United States and what's driving it and how she can stop it or at least slow it down, and why she didn't see it 20 years ago when it was, and stop it, try to nip it in the bud. But, these are the unsatisfying questions that have become our reality, and they're hard to deal with in thriller fiction. And I think you see a lot of people not wanting to. You see a lot of people pulling back into, like pulling their focus in on their character and the battles that character has personally or with personal enemies and stuff, as opposed to the grander scale of, what's happening in America and what are we going to do about it. But because of Irene Kennedy being who she is, that's obviously something she's going to start thinking about.
And there's almost a clash of titans as Irene is dealing with this, and yet she knows the path forward is to meet with Catherine Cook. And that limo scene was, and the dialogue again, I've commended you for your writing. How did it feel writing someone who, I don't want to say could be equal to Irene, but someone who can throw her weight around just as well as Irene can? What was it like putting them together in that limo and talking about democracy?
It was super interesting because, Catherine Cook isn't really, you can't even describe her as a first lady. She's a co-president. So her power is, so far beyond what Irene Kennedy has. And that's just realistic. So it, I know people don't necessarily want to see it that way. I think fans maybe don't want to see it that way. I remember once somebody who was very, very Republican was talking to my father, who had been the legal attaché of the United Kingdom, the head of Interpol, and it was when Barack Obama had ordered the Osama bin Laden be killed. And, he didn't want to give Obama credit. So he said, oh, no, he was overridden by the head of the CIA. Obama didn't want to do it. And my father, who had worked for Bush, the first, laughed and was like, I don't think you understand how the government works. The CIA director does not override the president of the United States. And that's what we're seeing here is, Irene is just not even in this anywhere near the same level as the president of the United States. And that's just the way America works. So she has to navigate this situation extremely carefully because she has met her equal. Potentially close to her intellectual equal, but you add to Catherine Cook the power of the White House. And, that's a pretty formidable opponent. So the whole thing has to be negotiated and dealt with in a very calm and methodical manner. So I like that about this book because you don't get to see Irene behind the eight ball very often, and particularly when she knows it. So I think it's interesting to see how she handles that because she's always the smartest woman in the room, and that's not necessarily the case here.
We got a little bit more of Irene, I felt, in this book than in the past, and obviously we don't often see her, like you said, behind the eight ball. Yeah, and Mitch had to just trust that she was able to, going to be able to solve this mystery and the or problem in the end, and she obviously does.
Yeah, and I like seeing this because everybody's a hero when they have the upper hand, right?
Right.
But when when the gun's to your head, then how do you perform? And
right.
We got to see how Irene performed.
You like putting Mitch in unfamiliar situations. It was really cool to watch Irene have to be in that situation, both professionally, as we're saying, but also personally. We got a little peek behind the curtain for Irene, which is somebody we typically don't. Tommy's in college. She's reading, books for leisure, not books for work. She's considering a relationship. I feel like Irene might have had the most character development in this one, kind of subtly, more than anyone else. Do you feel like you set out to maybe develop her a bit more and push her to a next stage of her life and career?
Yeah, I don't know if I set out to do it, but because of her circumstances. We're doing spoilers here, right? So she lost her job. And I mean, that was her life. Her entire life, I mean, was wrapped up in running or working for the agency initially, but then running the agency. And all of a sudden, that's taken away from her, and that's pretty startling. I mean, like for anybody, right? Now you've got all of a sudden she's worked probably 16 hours a day. All of a sudden, you got 16 hours a day free. So she knew that relationships didn't work because of her job and all that stuff. And now, as much as one of her lives has been closed down, other avenues are opening. So yeah, I did want to see like how she would react to that, and see if she could. I mean, she always seems to land on her feet. I think she's a very introspective person, and understands what's going on with her and with the world around her. So, yeah, and that's something I don't know that I'm going to develop too much in the next book, but in later books, it would be interesting to see her have a bit of a life, because Mitch has gotten one.
Should we talk about the odds, Chris? Our little gambling bet that we have going on?
Yeah, I think so.
We've given our odds, and another guest we had on gave his odds on the possibly controversial question. We won't ask you to speak to it. Will Irene ever become president? We'll leave it at that. The question's on the table in the community, but we're not gonna press you on that.
All right. I don't plan that far ahead.
So far, I think we're all below a 50-50 chance. So it's not like there's pressure or anything.
Politics are an interesting thing, and I don't know how many people in their right mind would get involved in American politics right now. Right. So I once knew a guy who shall remain nameless who was offered he's a corporate guy, and he was offered a very high level job in the government, cabinet position. And he said, "What? And give up all my power?" And I feel like that's even worse now than it was when this happened.
Every time I watch West Wing, it gets worse and worse and more depressed, because it presents this ideal of what the American government can and should be, and the prestige and the honor behind it. And just watching it, when it came out early 2000s, like, whoa. And then watching it mid 2000s, watching it now is just straight up depressing.
And then and you realize it's not West Wing, it's a Veep.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
Now, you must have had fun taking us, while we're on the West Wing, taking us into the White House. Those security protocols in that final scene where Mitch is going through the Secret Service protocols, who all have foreign accents. Very interesting. There might be something there. But oh my God, I was thinking of you the whole time, that every little detail that you put in there, you must have just been enjoying. Was that a fun scene to write?
Yeah, because you have to put yourself in every character's shoes when you're writing from their point of view. So when I was writing Cook, I felt his fear. And I thought, man, if Mitch Rapp was after me, what would I do? And so all those security protocols were pretty organic, the way I created them, because it's what would have really happened if I were Cook and I was put in that position.
Well, I don't know if you wanted to ask, Chris, but you mentioned Joe Maslick before. And
yes, I wanted to get to
that. That is so badass what you do with him.
I don't know why me and Mike were talking last night. I love that scene especially like at the end of it, when he's trying to shove this like almost barely cooked cheeseburger in his mouth. I like how, again, we get a call back to him, and how he's come a long way from when Rapp shoved a bag full of money, or a briefcase full of money, and told him to run this brothel, whatever. Yeah, just this idea of, all right, Rapp calls him, grab a sniper and just drive and go, get your tail and go into the woods. And I don't care where you go, about an hour. Like, I don't know. Like, just take me through like just coming up with that idea, I guess.
You had fun with that one too.
I did. I thought it was super fun but it's fundamentally super stupid. Like, as Irene points out, right? And he was just pissed. You know what I mean? Basically, that's just Mitch Rapp pissed. And he's just, I'm just going to flick this guy's ear. And Irene's saying, you don't flick the president of the United States ear. It's really stupid. And he's basically like, I want this guy to feel. And, I think this is really, looking a little deeper into Rapp, who's always shown as this guy with no fear, and he doesn't fear for himself. But now he's got a weakness. He's got a family. Yeah. And he's basically said, I want this guy to feel like I feel every day, thinking that Claudia could get taken out, that, Anna could be standing next to her at the time. And I want this guy to sweat. And, of course, Irene being Irene is like, that was probably not the best way to handle the situation. But you can feel it from Mitch's standpoint, where you're just like, screw that guy. Like, I just want to make that guy burn. And I can't kill him right now, but I can make him worry.
He then doubles downs on that, right? When he flips Legion, that makes Irene even more pissed.
But in that sense, though, the way I see it was very much like that. He felt like that was a done deal. He wanted him dead at that point. That wasn't flicking his ear. He thought, well, if I can disappear for a little while, this, Legion can get this done, and then my problems are solved. I didn't do it, So
I thought it made complete sense that would be the natural progression. If you're not going to kill Legion, then use them. So
turn them.
And the perfect person, she gets rid of Cook, but nobody's really sure. Did he die of natural causes? Did he, did any Rapp have anything to do with it? Did Legion even exist? Like, it's a perfect, because Rapp just wants him gone, right? He doesn't there's no, he's not the kind of guy that's looking for, I don't know, to spike the ball or anything. He just wants him gone.
I want to read the novella about their mission to get the one guy killed using his own cow in a stampede. Yeah. Or just, a couple series novella on Legion in terms of all the kills that I'm sure there's plenty more, but the ones that they describe, sitting there waiting. Oh, I guess that would be a little bit boring, but waiting for someone to die for not having their stroke medicine or diabetes medicine, whatever. The little nuances there with Legion were pretty cool, and I think it fleshed out that character really nicely.
Yeah, I like her. I had she's a really, I think, was a character that was really interesting to develop, because you had to really put yourself in her position. Like, what would it be like growing up a very capable woman in Iran, with a really conservative father and like that? What would that do to you?
Right.
And, my favorite thought by her, part, I think, of that book with her in it, is where she's hacking those guys up with an axe and is thinking about Lizzie Borden and thinking, a woman ahead of her time. Like, she really admires the imagination and like sand that Lizzie Borden had to do something like that when women just didn't do those kinds of things. It was like a woman ahead of her time.
Right. So I guess, do we see more of Legion, or is this the only time we're going to see them?
At some point in the series. I'm not going to do it in the next series, I don't think. But she's interesting. But it's kind of got a very Mission Impossible feel to it.
Yeah, at the very end of the ambulance scene, and they're back at the house, it almost had this like very Sherlock Holmesy to it, or I always say the name wrong, but Agatha Christie type.
A whodunit.
We whodunit. We think yes. There you go.
Yeah. With the lettuce too. That was a whodunit moment.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say though that the hallmark of a Mitch Rapp thriller is super complicated operations.
No,
or
it's
dragged
not
out.
Mission
Whereas,
Impossible. Yeah.
yeah, and you think about her and like her plan for the president's death. You're not working in weeks, you're working in years. So, I don't know if that would be, you have to consider the Mitch Rapp structure and stay somewhat true to that. And I've played with it a little bit because the world has changed, but um, yeah, like moving into more of a Mission Impossible kind of thing. I think it would change the series too much.
You're saying we're not going to see Mitch Rapp pull off, a perfect skin mask like 5 times to reveal 5 different characters, like Ethan Hunt.
No, and I do, and I'll be honest with you, I really loved the Mission Impossible movies, and I loved the series when I was a kid. But yeah, it's just a different. Like
It's
if I was
different.
writing stuff on my own, under my own. I mean, I have a book I wrote about, stealing all the money out of Vegas. That is this extremely complex heist that takes up like half the book, but it wouldn't be right for a Mitch Rapp thriller.
That's why the Legion flip makes so much sense, because that's Mitch and Irene's wheelhouse is turning people, is really creating agents out of your enemy, and he turned Legion, and it was super cool. It was so much
Yeah,
fun.
and it's that's how you turn people. I mean, there's this kind of myth in the media and even in these books that you turn people with fear or shooting them in the knee or whatever, but you turn them by making it feel like this is in your best interest, like everybody wins here. And she sees this on and understanding what their weaknesses is, and hers is that drive that
The
she
glory
can't
to be the best.
control, to be the best, like to go from being this girl who was abused in Iran and put down and told she was never going to be able to be anything, and become the best hitter in the world. And that's a weakness, though. That's a weakness that somebody would exploit, because you know what she wants. And the minute you know what somebody wants, you can give it to them, and and get what you want.
And that's a hallmark of the universe, going back to Louis Gould.
Right. I was just
ultimately
about to
his
say that,
flaw
Mike.
was
Yeah.
hubris. And then Enzo Ruiz, he wanted to be killed by Rapp. There was glory in dabbling with the pinnacle and the zenith. And Rapp said, you could be the best well-known killer in the world, and that's coming from me. I'm almost bequeathing to you, if you make this hit, I can appoint you as the next wave of the top, and you'll do anything for that.
And you can think, if you were Sarah, that's pretty attractive offer. Not to mention all the money. I mean, it was kind of a win-win for her, and obviously her her other option was getting buried beneath the azaleas. So it was a pretty clear decision.
I think you could also see her like she's taking on more and more missions that she's getting pushback from her partners from, and it's like this itch to like, all right, we're gonna one up, and then we'll get out, or we'll go back to whatever, and then it all culminates with this, the final mission that gets her caught.
Yeah, and I see her kind of as she's a little bit of a serial killer vibe here, because serial killers. I'm not an expert, but I once talked to a guy who worked at the FBI that worked with them, and they say they're in a frenzy, and so they're not going to stop. I mean, I was talking to a guy at MI5 about Jack the Ripper, and I said, well, maybe he just stopped. And they're like, no, he had to die. He died, or something happened, because at that point, they don't stop. They never stop. And she's a little that way, that she's going for more and more and more risk and bigger hits, and eventually she's going to die. But that's her end, not I'm going to retire and take up knitting or something like that. Whereas the people, and the people who work with her, though, would kind of like to retire and take up knitting. So there's that. There's that tension between them.
That's because they're logistics people. The operations people, they're a different breed. Like Rapp on the other side is struggling with getting out and what that looks like. So it's kind of two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, the rush, right? The rush, the power, all that stuff, and then to to chuck it. I mean, and it's funny, I've known people who have done that, but the vast majority of them don't handle it that well. I mean, it's just a very difficult thing to go, particularly if you retire from the government, very high level government job. Do you, I mean, it just stops. It's like the spigot turns off, right? One day you're the most powerful guy in the country, and the next day you're just, I don't know, driving around your golf cart. And I've met people that were really psyched for that to happen. And I knew one guy who started a fruit stand on his, like, literally super powerful guy. And he's like, I just want to go work in my orchard and have a fruit stand.
Wow.
Yeah. Go rock climbing, ride bikes,
yeah.
and do woodworking, right?
Yeah, but I do that during. It'd be weird to turn off the spigot. I knew another guy who really wanted to carve ducks. And I really? You want to carve decoy? Going to go from like all this power and glory to, doing that. And he's like, yeah, really, I've just been dreaming for years of carving decoy ducks.
Do you think it's like similar to the fact that, could you ever see yourself just not wanting to write anymore?
Yeah, I think about it more now that I'm older. What would I do? I mean, in a way, you feel the clock ticking, and you think there are a lot of other things I want to accomplish in life. That I'd like to be a good guitar player. I'd like to be fluent in Spanish, and I'd actually like to be able to a good woodworker, not a guy who just like sort of clamps everything together and hopes the glue holds. And so yeah, I mean, I'd like to have more time to read, frankly. All these books stacked up everywhere, and I don't really have time to read them. So, yeah, I mean, on the other hand, that's it's a little like, I think I was sympathetic to Irene when I was writing that, and to Mitch. You're just like, okay, yeah, but boy, that's a lot of time on your hands. I mean,
Yeah.
It's a little bit scary, staring into that abyss. So the answer is I'm not sure. It's a topic of regular conversation at my house, though.
Well, speaking of all the glory, you're up to 8 Rapp books. That's incredible. I think Vince wrote what? 13 of them?
I think it's 13, yeah.
So what do you have planned for 2027? It's going to be a heck of a year for you, no?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, because I mean, people really like this book. I just got a copy of the Times list, and it's number 2.
Nice.
It debuted at number 2, and took Stephen King down. So
that's awesome.
I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard to say. Like, I just can't. I don't plan ahead that far, to be honest with you, because it's hard. Because the world changes too fast.
Yeah, we were going to bring it up, the fact that it's got really good reviews on Amazon right now. It's trending at 4.7 and 4.66. Take those numbers on Goodreads. Take those numbers for whatever you take them, and then obviously New York Times. That's actually something that matters. Not only,
but I mean, they go hand in hand, though.
Yes.
I mean, to me, it's very gratifying. I think more than the sales, really. I mean, obviously, it's important that they sell a lot, but it's really gratifying that people still like the books. I mean, 22 books. I mean, that's what I'm writing now, is the 22nd book. That people have stuck with this series for that long, and even through the transition to me, and are still super excited. I go out, I was just out at Poison Pen, and people are still excited about the story and the evolution of Mitch Rapp and where things are going. So, I wouldn't say that I mean, it's great to be high on the New York Times list, but I wouldn't say that's something I think about when I'm writing the books. I think about, are fans going to think this is really cool?
And yeah, crafting a good book. Yeah, I'll just to say, give you a little anecdote. I one of my neighbors just got the book and started reading it, and then he knew that I do this podcast and that I'd already read it, and then he saw me walking down the street, and he had gotten to the scene where Mitch kill and Claudia kill all the people in the house, and that scene. And he was like, "Oh, I was reading it. And it was just like a warm blanket. Like Mitch Rapp is back in my life right now."
Yep.
Yeah, it's really it's a cool community to be a part of. And it's great to see that people are really vibing with this one.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always felt this way. I think we all do about these series characters. It's like a friend of yours that you see once a year. Or like your coolest friend, clearly. But they become really real to you. Mitch did to me as a fan, and you really want to see what they're up to and have this real personal connection to them. So everybody who reads Mitch has their own ownership of that relationship between them and the characters. And I think that's just super cool that they feel that real to people, that they really care about where the books are going, and sometimes get mad about where the books went. But I feel like that signals that they have a very real connection to what's happening, real investment in it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And I wasn't sure. I told this to Chris before we recorded. I wasn't sure I was gonna get here, but I'm ready to say it. Not only is it my favorite Kyle Mills Mitch Rapp book, in my opinion, this is your Consent to Kill. It really is.
Thank you.
It's different in so many ways, but it is just really enjoyed this one. And the way Vince used Consent to Kill to bring the universe forward, bring the characters forward, reignite passion and meaning in their lives. Because things maybe were getting stale to that point with Vince's writing. And it just like sparked this whole new movement in the Rappverse. And I feel like this book is hitting so many of those notes for me. And the action scenes kind of parallel that book a little bit. And well done. Hats off. And another point of gratitude for you. I have a double limerick. We're not going to let you go.
Wow, a double
limerick this time. Yeah.
Nice.
Oath of Loyalty commences with a bang, and Mitch Rapp embedded in a Latin gang. The clashing of titans. Tony Cook he frightens. Resignation from the White House? Hot dang. Geez, Kyle Mills has done it again. Words just keep flowing from his pen. The best he has written. With the dialogue, I am smitten. I need the next book. Oh, please, when?
Nice.
That was a good one, Mike.
Thank you.
You deserved a good one.
Yeah. I should. That would be a good blurb. I don't think anybody's had a blurb that's a limerick before.
Yeah, just a little peek behind the curtain. Mike normally fires off these limericks as we're finishing the notes in pre-pod, but he put some time into this one, and it definitely shows. So,
when are you going to break into haiku?
I know. We need to switch it up, Mike. I keep telling him that I'm going to go back because we have them saved. I'm going to go back and make a little Mitch Rapp limerick book and
Nice.
give it and get it framed for Mike or something.
That'd be great.
Well, Kyle, thanks so much. This was a blast tonight. I would say my favorite and our best interview we've done together. So thanks for taking the time.
Oh, always a pleasure. I'm really glad you guys liked the book.
Loved it.
I guess before you go, how has your? I should ask. I meant to ask you this at the beginning. How is your? It was not virtual this year. So how was your time interacting with fans? You actually got to go to both Arizona and Minnesota, right?
Yeah, it's been really fun. It's so nice to be back face to face with people again. The virtual thing is still big, so it's an interesting, I think it's a changing dynamic now. We were just talking about that people really liked the virtual stuff, and it's also made things much more international. People tune in from all over the world. People who could never in a million years come and see you, people like China and stuff like that. And that's, I think, really an interesting dynamic. So a little weirder because, I think a lot of authors are now not getting the physical crowds they used to. And I think it upsets some of them. I wouldn't say it bothers me that much because to me, a smaller crowd is also a little more, it's a little different than speaking to 400 people, but if you're speaking to 50, it's a little more intimate. People can, ask questions. You can have a little bit of dialogue and stuff like that. It's functional. So I think, COVID changed a lot in the world, and it's going to be interesting to see if it stays that way, if it has staying power, these changes. So, but super fun to be able to shake hands with people and talk to people face to face.
If you're ever on the East Coast, we'll make an effort to get where you are and maybe do one of these live one day.
Yeah, that'd be really fun. I'm sure I will. This tour is a little bit abbreviated because I spent 6 days at BoucherCon.
Right.
And I think the publisher's a little bit protective of me because I, after a while on the road, it's hard for me. I'm not used to it. And it's one of those things where it literally is one of those, a different place every night. You're getting up at 4 a.m. every morning to fly and then do a speech. And then the next morning you're out. And so they said, well, you're going to do 6 days at BoucherCon. We're not going to then, immediately send you out on, 2 weeks, a different place every day. So maybe next year it'll be a little bit wider as opposed to so concentrated. But because BoucherCon was in Vince's hometown, it made sense to do that.
Right.
Gotcha.
So David's getting soft. He's not, running you into the ground these days.
David's getting soft. I think they think I'm crazier than I actually am.
Well, we don't want a Sadie Hansen on our hands here, so.
Exactly.
All right, Kyle, thank you very much.
Yeah, it was fun talking to you guys. See you, on the internet, and we'll talk again next year, right?
Next year.
That's good. Yeah, stay in touch. Thanks
again. All right, we'll do. Thanks.
All right, guys, we got to thank our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry App, our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Insta at thrillerpodcast. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch.